Good morning.
Morning.
We had a few rough spots, but we're here, all of us again. No place in the world I'd rather be than right here, right now. Yay! Here we are again on beautiful, beautiful Green Hill. The older I get, and I've just turned 90, the more precious this little church and cemetery becomes. Sam Burns, my father, who lived at the forks of the road, was twice married. First to Nancy Hardman. They had a girl, Lona. That's Mabel and Marty's mother. Then they had a little boy, Archie. Nancy died giving birth to Archie, and he died 8 months later. On July 4th, 1911, he married my mother, Iona Rexrode, from Ireland, West Virginia, and they had 8 children. In 1928, my father, Sam, a Methodist Protestant preacher, died suddenly. Nothing was known about coronaries and heart problems. And he left a widow and 8 children. His casket was placed right here. In 1929, our brother Junior, a 10-year-old, died of pneumonia and measles, and his casket was placed right here. In 1930, our mother, a grieving widow, died, leaving 7 children, and her casket was placed right here. I was the youngest. I was 6. My brother Reese, the oldest, was 16. The Great Depression was in full swing. All of the Burns relatives attended the funeral. I'll take that one, I'll take that one, I'll take that one. They all took us. My grandmother, Judy Burns, a widow who lived at the forks of the road, with her married son, Uncle Lummy, Aunt Texie, son Marvin, and Lona, Sam's daughter. The Hetty post office was in the living room, which was also my grandmother's bedroom. There was a big cabinet on the back wall that held all the mail, and then there was her bed, and then the big coal fire. Everyone came to collect the mail. They sat by the coal fire to keep warm and talk. My grandmother sat in her little chair by the window, and after a while she'd say, "It's time for you to go now." Wouldn't you like to say that to some of your relatives? They would all politely get up and they would leave. We children were separated, going into homes where the aunts and the uncles had their own children, all of our same ages. Naturally, their children had a preference over our wants and our needs. We learned to take whatever was given us, quietly getting used to being second best in all situations. My brother Reese and I lived with my Uncle Billy, who was a Methodist Protestant preacher in Jane Lou. 1930, the Great Depression was upon us. Hobos came to the kitchen door asking for food. They were always given a fried egg sandwich and a cup of coffee. They always were very, very grateful and would even offer to do work for us. And then the gypsies came. Anybody remember gypsies? Gypsies came through the town with horses and buggies selling little flower stands and stools. We were told that they'd steal little girls, so we'd run out. Then came Memorial Day. My grandmother would bring all of us back up here on the mountain for the summer. We were together again for 3 months. We'd take off our shoes on Memorial Day and wouldn't put them back on again till Labor Day. In 1933, on Thanksgiving, our wonderful grandmother died in her sleep at the age of 87. I was 10 years old. All the relatives came to the funeral. In those days, they had wakes. A wake was an all-night watch beside the body of the corpse. As we entered the front door of my grandmother's, to the right was the living room. We were never allowed to go in the living room to play. There was an organ there and some good furniture, and the blinds were all pulled. That's where they put grandmother's casket. Above the parlor on the second floor with the bedroom was another coal fire. I was put in bed in that room. The women around the fire began talking about omens, and the talk got weirder and weirder. There was a birthday cake for my grandmother with a candle, and it was burning. And mysteriously, out of nowhere, came a hand and snuffed out the flame. After that, they knew my grandmother was going to die. I lay in bed, scared to death, and shook with that talk. Her casket was placed here. In 1941, my brother Harold and I were graduating from Lost Creek High School. On May the 5th, after playing a baseball game, he became ill, was taken to the hospital, and died of a meningitis. Our graduation was ruined. Harold had a 4-year athletic scholarship to Salem College. The Jane Lou basketball team and the West Milford basketball team all came to the funeral wearing their jackets. Our Lost Creek boys were the pallbearers, and the senior girls were the flower girls. And in those days, they had flower girls who would line up behind the hearse, carry the flowers out. When he died, the church bell was tolled 18 times to let everyone on Green Hill know that somebody had died. There were no phones on Green Hill. His casket was placed here. In the fall of 1941, I entered Salem College. On December 7, 1941, President Roosevelt spoke on the radio. It was Sunday. We have been attacked at Pearl Harbor. We are at war. At the end end of the first semester, in January, every able-bodied boy was out of Salem College. Also, my Lost Creek boys with whom I graduated. Salem College's 400 students had dwindled to 150 girls. It was the way it was from 41 to 1945 when the war ended. The next fall, the boys returned to school on the GI Bill. My senior year, a handsome young Senator Jennings Randolph brought Eleanor Roosevelt to Salem on the B&O train to be our commencement speaker. All of Salem turned out to see her enter and leave the station. I was assigned to meet her backstage and bring her on the stage. I tried to think of something kind to say, and I said, "Mrs. Roosevelt, are you tired?" "No!" That was the entire conversation. Kathleen Herbert, a senior girl, was in a wheelchair. She was very kind to her. Although President Roosevelt was a polio victim, he was never in a wheelchair. We didn't know that he should be in a wheelchair until several years later. I've got one more page. Mrs. Roosevelt visited the State Girls Industrial Home in Salem and was given a quilt. One night, President Roosevelt was traveling from Cincinnati to Washington, D.C. on the National Limited. Trainloads of soldiers from Camp Atterbury, Indiana, came to Salem and formed a human chain on both sides of the railroad track. We talked to them and gave them hot dogs and exchanged addresses. At 1:30, the president's train came through. At 1:45, they were loaded on the trucks again. That and Mrs. Roosevelt's visit were the only exciting things that happened in Salem College in 4 years. During the war, the young men in Green Hill left for the war. The families moved to Ohio, elsewhere to work in the factories. My uncle and his family and my sister moved to Erie, Pennsylvania. Every summer I worked in the General Electric war plant in Erie, where they made turbines for the ships. I drove an electric jitney on the midnight shift. You would know it as a forklift. At the end of the war, the people did not return to Green Hill. They had established their lives elsewhere. Since then, many other members of my family have been laid to rest in this precious, precious hillside cemetery. Today, all of us here are the community of Green Hill. Precious memories have brought us here because we hold the spirit of Green Hill in our hearts. I wonder